let's not waste any more time. Like I said, the UFC is doing a great job in terms of how they've scheduled these fights and the bout order, because they're kicking it off with an absolute banger in the featherweight division as Diego Lopes comes in at minus 155. He goes up against the streaking Steve Garcia, who comes in at plus 135. Now, starting off on the Diego Lopes side of things, he fell short in his second bid to win the featherweight title as he came up short once again to Alexander Volkanovski back in January. To a lot of people, including myself, we could see that that fight was a lot clearer for Volkanovski than the first fight was. Lopes, obviously, in the first fight, had some success in 2 separate rounds with his power and nearly finishing Volkanovski in some of those spots. But Volkanovski's championship medal came through for him as he was able to work through those bad positions and still go on to win those fights by decision, or at least that first fight. Then the second, or the bouncing back for that for Lopes, he had to go up against John Silva, who had been absolutely crushing his competition with his power and his maniacal fighting style, and Lopes met him with that. In the first round, we saw Lopes do a great job in terms of controlling the back of John Silva, threatening with submissions, but ultimately not finishing the job there. And then in the second round, Silva was hitting Lopes with shots that would drop an elephant. But we know the legendary ironclad chin of Lopes has pushed him through a lot of these bad spots, and that ultimately led to that final barrage in the second round that led to Lopes landing that nasty spinning back elbow to open a nasty cut on the head of John Silva, but that also rocked Silva very badly. Lopes followed up with a couple more ground and pound shots and got the stoppage there, earning that win on that Noche UFC card back in 2025. That earned him another title shot against Alexander Volkanovski, to the displeasure of many MMA fans or hardcore MMA fans concerning the other viable options that we had. But Lopes had no answer for the game planning style of Volkanovski coming up short in that fight once again. It was the perpetual movement of Volkanovski, the well-timed blitz attacks, the calf kicks as well, that really caused Lopes a ton of issues. There were a couple spots where Lopes landed some good counters and showcased the power that he has, but Volkanovski stayed very disciplined and was able to outpoint Lopes en route to a decision victory. Now, Lopes kind of stuck in a weird spot, right? You got 2 losses to the champion. Now you got to go out there and defend your top 3 ranking. And, he's doing up against a guy that is streaking at this point in time. But let's not forget what made Lopes so great. Very aggressive BJJ game, nasty knockout power that led to those 3 straight knockout victories, eventually leading to those 2 wins that got him that title shot. But it's his power, it's his aggressiveness, and it's his legendary chin that has made him so difficult for a lot of opponents to deal with, especially if they can't get away from that power or that jiu-jitsu game. Now he's going up against the smashing machine, I believe it is, or the mean machine, Steve Garcia, who's absolutely been streaking as well after a 1-2 start to his UFC career. Losses to Luis Pena and then getting knocked out by Mahashate has now led to this 7-fight winning streak for the New Mexico product, who's going out there and starching most of his opponents. He's on a, like I said, 7-fight winning streak, 6 of those 7 wins coming by knockout, and 4 of those 6 coming in the first round. That included his first UFC main event last time around, as he knocked out David Onama in about 3.5 minutes of them sharing the cage together. That night, it seemed like Onama, and actually let's talk about going into that fight. Going into that, I thought the speed and power of Onama would allow him to really take advantage of some of the striking defense issues in Garcia's game, but it really seemed like Onama was intimidated by the power of Garcia, and Garcia was kind of just having target practice. He was showcasing a lot of activity, a lot of feints, throwing a lot of volume as well, and that ultimately opened up the big shot to put Onama away. Just to show how muzzled Onama was, Onama only landed 2 of 16 strikes that he threw in those 3.5 minutes, where in comparison, Garcia landed 33 of his 62 attempted strikes, ultimately leading to that finish, like I said, in the first round. It's great to see him really digging in and leaning on that power because of how intimidating it is to a lot of fighters and how successful he's been with it. Even knocking out a guy like Melquizael Costa, who was on a solid run of his own, leading into his first UFC main event just a few weeks ago against Arnold Allen. Garcia, fast, powerful, improving his striking game. He can be grinded out by guys that can go out there and implement a good enough grappling game. But in terms of just leaning on his power and his timing, it's obviously worked out pretty well for him. And I'm sure the guys down there at Jackson Wink are very appreciative of him really tapping into his potential and being successful with it. Now, this is a great scrap between two guys that can go out there and just lay down the smackdown, right? They can go out there, land big power, and put their opponents away pretty quickly. And that's why I said that this is the perfect matchup to start off this card, because we know that both of them are going to bring the aggressiveness and set the tone for the last 6 fights. I find myself often fading both guys because of how finish-centric they often are in their fights, but I feel as though Diego Lopes is just a little bit more well-rounded. I think he'll be able to meet the power punching of Garcia and lean on that ironclad chin, and in those moments of throwing those big shots, Lopes can find that counter to put Garcia down. Also mix in the aggressive BJJ approach of Lopes, which I think could potentially cause Garcia some problems, especially if Lopes is able to find his way to the back like he did against John Silva in the first round of that matchup. I don't think Garcia has as good submission defense as John Silva did, so it's obviously possible that Lopes can snatch up the neck of Garcia if he's able to get a similar back position, especially so early in the fight. But even if these guys end up throwing down in the pocket and exchanging big shots, I still expect it to be Lopes who ends up landing the more effective damage, countering some of the wild shots that Garcia often throws out there. And I don't think Lopes will be intimidated by the power of Garcia. Knowing the type of big shots he's eaten in the past, I expect him to eat those shots once again here, and then just land that perfect counter to either find the straight up knockout or the club and sub. The method of victory I'm going to lean on here is the submission. I think at some point Lopes will be able to find that neck of Garcia and force him to tap, but a lot of that success is going to have to come from exchanging with Garcia in the pocket and trying to land big power of his own. So I like Lopes here. I like Lopes by submission specifically, and I think he starts off the night right with a big time performance, halting the 7-fight winning streak of Steve Garcia.